Peter R. Breggin, MD, is called the conscience of psychiatry for his many decades of successful reform efforts. His scientific and educational work provide the foundation for modern criticism of drugs and ECT and lead the way in promoting more caring and effective therapies. His books include Talking Back to Prozac, Toxic Psychiatry, Medication Madness, Psychiatric Drug Withdrawal, and now, Guilt, Shame, and Anxiety, Understanding and Overcoming Negative Emotions. Welcome to the Dr. Peter Breggin Hour.
I know that for many of you, this is a very, very difficult time. Probably for all of you, it's a troubling time. I know that some of you already know people who have died. I know there are world leaders that we may lose. I know that vast numbers are not employed. I have friends now who are unemployed. I know it can be very hard to be living together. If someone their identity has been about working and you can't work and you're home now, and what do you do with yourself, and your partner doesn't know how to relate to you. But also there's the mortgage, and there's the savings for the kids, and then there's maybe having the kids home, and do you homeschool them, and do you or does your district provide some schooling, and now you have to be the teachers? There's a lot of jokes about that. It's tough out there, and I know that. What Howie and I can offer is some help with what I think is in many ways the single most important thing, which is talking to the people you love, relating to the people you love, helping the children in the household, dealing with the conflicts. And my last show, I did a solo on this, so I've got a show where I talk about the last one, this is the Dr. Peter Breggin Hour. This is my wonderful audience is hearing me on PRN radio, and pretty much simultaneously or a little later, it gets put up on my YouTube, the Dr. Peter Breggin channel. So care of the radio with PRN and care of the YouTube channel, you may be hearing me or seeing me. And my guest, Howie Glasser, who's a dear friend, and I'll introduce Howie in a minute. He's kind of sitting there trying to make himself feel comfortable on the camera, looking good. We've had tremendous technical difficulties because of the crowding of the internet, which I won't get into, but Howie's been a good sport, and I've tried to be a good sport, and my wife's been a good sport, and we are directly talking together and recording it. I'm recording it. So this is really without the aids of engineers elsewhere or the radio station, although we'll get up on the radio station. So some of that is the kind of stuff that happens from the coronavirus and everybody using the internet. It's hard to get decent connections. And both Howie and I are just, profoundly, understand what suffering is. We've had suffering. Our lives were not always as wonderful as they are now and as good as they are now. We didn't always have people to love and love us as we do now. Howie has a wonderful partner now named Denise. And of course, most people aren't exactly in that situation. So I understand all the difficulties out there. We both do, even though we may not be living them in the intensity that many of them. But I want to try to help you with my show from last week, which is called Talking Together. And this show, which is maybe how about coronavirus madness, how to relate to it. We're going to try to help you relate to all of that. Howie is someone I've known for years, and I'm fond of saying he's the only psychotherapist whom I often think of when I'm doing therapy. Long ago, I stopped remembering my supervisors, except when reminiscing. They were with me for years, I suppose, from my psychiatric training and my friends that we talked about therapy with and so on. But Howie focused on something that's incredibly important, which is really acknowledging the greatness in children. And as it turns out, acknowledging the greatness in everyone you work with is really, really important. For all I know, I wouldn't be addressing my wonderful audience like I've done from the start of my radio show if it wasn't for Howie. Um, because I had to think about that some and think, was that artificial? No, no, it isn't. But there was that feeling of, and I know Howie's
Mhm.
been hit with that criticism sometimes. But it's not if you really have enthusiasm for people. So Howie and I, we have an overabundance of enthusiasm and optimism. And it's not a bad time for that, folks. Um, so Howie's got a couple of books out. Tell us about the books. I think I wrote the introduction to one of them. What's the book I wrote the introduction to?
That's Transforming the Difficult Child, and it describes the nurtured heart approach.
And that's what you call your approach, the nurtured heart approach. And you've tried to put
Yeah.
it in schools. You've had some success with that.
Yes. Yes. It's a work in progress. I mean, I'd love to be in every school.
Mhm.
There's probably hundreds of schools that have taken a good look and adopted Nurtured Heart to some extent, and that continues. So that means a lot to me. It's a great place to begin the journey of building inner wealth in children, having them feel a sense of their greatness and who they really are, and not having to go through the nonsense that a lot of us have gone through in fighting ourselves.
Well, suppose we have parents. Let's just dive into it. Maybe we have a single parent, and she's got two boys. I mean, I can't think of a more difficult situation than to be a
Mhm.
single parent with maybe a 10 and 12-year-old boy. Um, what strategies do you suggest she does when she's talking with them? How should she begin to think a little differently than any of us do unless we get very conscious about it?
Yeah, and let me put it in the context of what you began with. We're in this interesting moment in time where the stress is up. That parent may be concerned about their work, maybe trying to work at home if they have that opportunity, and their kids are home from school because that's where the world is at right now. And the kids, they may be sharing computers. They may not have the luxury of more than one computer. So some of the education is being conducted through Zoom or other platforms right now. So the way I would look at it is, I'm not trying to be pie in the sky or Pollyanna-ish. That mom, I would encourage that mom to feel her stress when it comes in waves. It's not 24/7. It's not every last moment, but when it arrives in whatever forms, I like to believe that we could breathe. Our heart has handled everything that's happened up till now, in our human suffering. I personally like to embrace that instead of being braced against it. So I like it to be transparent and honest with myself. Ourselves is one of those who we love as well as other people. So I'm going to love myself by breathing it in, but then I'm going to try and take that very energy and turn it into something that's going to be medicinal. That's going to help open up my ability to be with my kids. So I'm the greatness of being empowered. I'm the greatness of being kind, even in the face of when I'm frustrated. I'm going to build my inner wealth while I'm trying to do the same for my children. Their intensity might be spiking. So, rather than try and snuff them out and put a blanket over their intensity or just yell at them and tell them to cut it out, what I want to do is I want to be all the more willing in this moment of time to see through to the moments when they're handling their intensity well, when they're being kind to their 10 or 12-year-old sibling, when they're, and give evidence, Charlie, you went out of your way to be helpful, even though you may not realize it. You gave You gave Alex space just now to use the computer, and you didn't argue with him and you didn't fuss. Those show me your respectfulness. You are being the greatness of respectful right now. I try and help adults to insert kids into the beingness of the qualities instead of saying, waiting till the problems happen and then jump. You know, the old school of parenting is, you know, the problem happens and that's when we try and teach the lesson. And if we're stressed and they're stressed, we may wind up saying, golly gee, Charlie, why can't you be nice? I've told you a million times it's not okay to be disrespectful, and then we're rowing in the wrong direction. You know, I think we have ample opportunity to see when problems aren't happening and take advantage of those moments and use those moments. Tell the truth. You know, I'm a fierce proponent of telling the truth, but if we look at the truth under a microscope, we could see into these beautiful qualities that people have. And I do like calling them aspects of a child's greatness. I love the idea that we can build kids up. You know, we can make them inner wealth billionaires if we set our mind to it.
I think this is a wonderful principle, folks, and I want to spend some time on it. Don't dismiss it. Don't think, well, this doesn't sound like all that dreary psychology I've learned, or the behaviorism that I've learned, or this or that. One of the things that Howie used as an example that struck me years and years ago when I heard him talk, I used to, when I did conferences, when Ginger and I did conferences, we would invite Howie to talk, and Howie does trainings of hundreds of people every year, right in this kind of area we're talking about. And he said, you know, if you look at a lot, what goes on with a teacher in a library, quite often the only people she pays attention to are the ones that are making noise and disrupting. And she doesn't go over to the kids who are being quiet and pat them and say, you know, it's really great how you concentrate. It's really great how you respectful you are. I saw when you got up and took a break, how quiet you were coming in and out. So what he's saying, moms, dads, big brothers and sisters, maybe even the little ones, if they get to watch this, look for what positive is going on, what's being expressed. And my tendency would be to say, you know, it pleases me so much to see you behaving this way, in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's exactly the right way, because what Howie is saying is address their beingness and encourage it for themselves and in themselves and say, that's really wonderful, you know, the two of you, we've been together here at the dinner table for 15 minutes or 5 minutes, and it's really been going good. And I'm just really impressed with how you two are facing this, the way we're cooped up together. And similarly, you know, if your husband is just so grumpy and angry and upset because he can't work and now he's afraid he can't pay the mortgage, and you're thinking more about how miserable he's making you than even the mortgage, and maybe he says something like, honey, I'm really sorry that I've been this way. Or he says, honey, I'm going to try to be better. And now you got options. You can say, yeah, it's been bad. Or you could even say, that would be great. That would be nice. But if you addressed him the way Howie's suggesting, I think it would be more like, you know, George, that is so sweet that that's in you. It's really great that you could come out and just tell me that right now. And God bless you for that. And thank you for that. And go ahead now, pick up on that.
Well, I was just thinking, if you were gonna get like, I love where you took that example, and I'm an advocate of seeing with your heart, and I believe the heart has an uncanny ability to form language that's authentic, that carries a lot of weight. People who study heart math say the heart waves exude at 5,000 times the waves of the mind. So the heart has a powerful voice, but the heart can also see. and it could put what you're talking about under a microscope. So it could say, was it George?
Sure.
Is that the name you used? George, there's so many things about what you just said that I want to, first of all, allowing yourself to, in the middle of being frustrated, understandably frustrated, you've given yourself a moment to pause and to hear yourself and to say what you're saying to me, which shows such kindness. It shows your loving attitude. It reveals to me the spirit of kindness that you really want to live by. That means the world to me.
What I see when I do family therapy, Howie, is that in the beginning when I was younger, I would look for the problems and point them out right away. And now I may sometimes do that, but I really help people see that they can bring out the beauty in each other. I don't use the word greatness the way you do. I use beauty and goodness. And in the kids, I
Perfect.
use greatness more. I think the
Perfect.
kids really respond to that.
Yeah.
And folks, I mean, this is so important that we did an earlier show, Howie and I, that we just couldn't use, again, because we're having so much interconnectivity. But I didn't even feel it was wasted that I couldn't show it to anybody else because it was so good for me. I've been talking more with my grandchildren, and I was at that time, and I'm going to try to get back to it. I was doing a course every morning for them for their class, so that they could count in their class, and that's no longer the case. So it's more just my having fun with them. But I started to do more of what Howie suggests, and so I'd be on with my 8 and 12-year-old grandkids, second grade and sixth grade. And I'd say to them, the way, and it's so true. I'd say the way you treat your little brother is just amazing. And I've always known that about you, and just the most remarkable thing. And I expect, and to run, okay, yeah, no, he really likes it. And then so I include Allie, my daughter, and she's over cooking in the corner, and I shout something to her about what a wonderful mother she is, and how her kids will sit and just talk and be so great, and then run around and still be great. So it's interesting. You find your own way, and I have found that addressing adults in terms of goodness and the beauty and their responsibility, and kids can do that too, but they also love the greatness, because I think especially for a child, it's acceptable to want to be great and to be greater. And we adults, I think sometimes I get embarrassed about the idea of being great. Although I like it when Howie tells me I am. I still have a little difficulty with it. So, Howie, I'm just going to give it back to you. Pick up some more pieces of this. You've been training people in this for a long time.
Yeah. So, a couple of thoughts that bounce off of what you have been saying. And I'm going to start by saying I saw you light up when you talked about your grandchildren, and your face just glowed, and it just shows how much you love them, and you get credit for the love in your heart. You've manifested that love. Everybody has a loving, deep nature, but not everybody learns how to manifest it. So I want you to hear that I see that greatness in you. So
thank you, folks. Let yourself beam at the people you love. There's a couple of still shots that are of me with my grandkids. I'm beaming. I seem to radiate, and they're smiling, and I'm smiling. Let yourself beam. We're all sources of love. Beam. But go ahead, Howard.
It's a wonderful conversation, Peter, and I can't help but believe that this will be helpful for people who are in this situation right now, with kids, without kids, with a partner, without a partner. It all applies.
I want to focus on some of the things you're saying that I don't generally focus on, and that is, and the folks haven't heard me talk a lot about. I talk about being a source of love, but you were talking about, and all of a sudden your picture is better. You're talking about breathing in the world around you, just sopping up the misery, the happiness, the conflict, and being aware that you can take that in your greatness and make it into something where you have empathy for other human beings, and you have caring, and you can then teach this wonderful nurtured heart approach where people learn that the basic communications should be about encouraging each other's wonderfulness. Um, and I love hearing you, and it makes me think that people around the world or people who watch this, they could maybe sit back in a moment, once they have a moment alone, or just when other people are occupied, and just do what I hear you doing, which is sopping up in terms of your own ability to transform and understand and care and love. And
Yeah.
as I describe your saying, is that a somewhat adequate description of what you're saying, Howie?
Yeah. It's almost like we have, there's a beautiful secret in our universe that we have treasure buried in our backyard. And when we discover it, we can be have a sense of wealth. That what I'm referring to is, a lot of people, for me growing up, my parents were through World War II. My father was in the war. He came back shell-shocked, and um, which is what they called PTSD back then. And he was kind of a loving man who had he had his fair share of numbness. Everybody did in my culture. My family was here in the States, but all the glaciers in Europe evaporated by way of the Holocaust and hundreds, and everybody was hurt. Everybody, kind of threw a blanket over whatever they were feeling, and so they never their life force. They never got to live the full life and magnitude of who they were. What I'm saying in contrast to that is if we're brave enough, daring enough, we can just be honest with ourselves, moment to moment to moment, little bits at a time. We don't have to just sit and cry in a corner, but we could get a flash of the waves coming in. I don't have to marinate in my anger. I could just feel the energy of it and drink it in and convert that into whatever I want to convert it. It's like you're gardening and you've created your own compost, and the compost is superfood. It gives you an advantage.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying to become a sponge and to become a basket case because of your worries, fears, doubts, or happiness, joy. All of that is just energy, and at the bottom of all energy, I think you'd agree with me, is love. And all we're doing is kind of distilling everything down into its pure form of love. And we get to be more loving. And there's no doubt in my life over the last 10 years that I've been really actively doing this and teaching this, that I've gotten to see in me that I've gotten to be more loving, manifest more love. What could be better, Peter? You have that experience. You know what I'm talking about. You are a
Absolutely.
manifester of love.
Absolutely. And, cooped up under the conditions that folks are now, I think it
Mm-hmm.
really is an opportunity to decide that you're going to really recognize in yourself, like Howie is saying, that you can just remarinate, recook. You can just do something special with the pain you've been through, the isolation you've been through, the misery you see outside, the fears you have about, jobs and mortgages and stock market and all these things that everybody has fears about, and decide what you've got at the moment that you control is loving the people you're with. And Howie gives us a window into how to really begin doing that. And that's by identifying their goodness, their greatness, their moments of being loving, their times that they console you, their times that they're peaceful, their times that they rise above the anxieties and do some rational thinking. Um, and and also, if your partner is really down and out, or you're down and out, focus on some of the goodness in the past. Um, go back to how much you loved each other, and remember some of the good times, and remember that we still live in this amazing country, and there'll be times again to work, and times again to get out, and times again to do things and go to the beach and drive our cars and all those other things. So this is actually a good time for cooking. It's interesting. One of the things my wife is doing that she's never really done before, seriously, in a whole new way, is cooking. And Ginger's really great at, she's just marvelous at seeing the future and what's unfolding. So by the time the virus was really scaring people, Ginger already had 2 years of dried foods and frozen foods and this kind of food, that kind of food. But nonetheless, she keeps getting some fresh food and dropped on the front porch, and she's cooking. And she's enjoying cooking for me and Mom. It was never anything that I included in what I needed or desired from her. In fact, we used to just eat out all the time, and that wasn't very healthy. We changed that. So this is a time to contemplate what matters, and with the folks around you, to actually practice with them. And you can be really direct about it. If you feel self-conscious, tell your kids, tell your husband, tell your wife, tell your mother and mother-in-law, tell them what you're doing, which is that you've decided you want to be the loving person you can be, and you want to start seeing it and identifying it in the people around you, because you think you can just drop all the old resentments and angers and just not express them. And you'll, I talk about that in a lot more detail, but maybe not as interesting, I'm not sure, but I talk about it in a lot more detail in the hour of last week, the talking together hour, where by myself I just describe all of this, and I bring up Howie. Pretty sure I talk about Howie. Certainly was on my mind. If I didn't, I was bad. But Howie just brings something really amazing and beautiful, because it's simple, it's pure, it's direct, it works. It works. All times I have to take all this weird stuff that can come into my head, and from my background, and from being a mammal and being a part of original sin, maybe, my Christians would say, my wife, mother might say, being evolutionary violence, prepared to be violent throughout evolution. All of that, we've just got all kinds of things and all these wounds, and just say, okay, I'm going to get on a different wavelength now. I'm going to tap that loving nature of mine, and I'm going to look for, and this is what Howie taught me, and look for in other people, and communicate with them about what's good about them, and what's wonderful about them, and what's great about them. And you might think to yourself, well, that's not going to work with my husband because he's lying in bed depressed. Oh, it'll work better with him because he's in desperate need of it. Or of your wife who's so angry at you for the way you've been behaving that there's no way you're going to switch to this. And you could say, oh, I can do that. I can just be talking about her beauty, her physical beauty, her eyes, her smile. Sometimes I'll tell Ginger about the curves of her eyes and how they blend with the curves of her nostrils and the curves of her mouth. And she just light up, I mean, it's a miracle for each other when we do that for each other. And it can be little things, or it can be really major things, and remind your partner about it and identify it especially with the children and more subtly with the adults, identify it in their every action. So literally, when Tommy has just been talking nicely to his sister for a minute, you say, that's wonderful. Say, what do you say? You do it your way, because I want people to hear your way. So Tommy's just been sweet to his sister for a minute.
Yeah, let me preface it by saying we're in an age, if you look at schools, where there are more kids who have the shades down, so to speak, and they have a death grip on the shades, and they're not going to give an inch, and they're not going to show up until somebody comes along, like a Peter Breggin or Howie Glasser or somebody else, who sees them profoundly. So how do you see somebody profoundly? I know one of the most moving things, before I answer your question, is one time after one of my trainings, there were 4 or 5 people lined up to say goodbye to me, and uncannily they said similar things. They said, my goodness, I've been, my family's been to church every week of my life. I've attended with them. My inspired pastor has been saying, be loving, we're loving beings. I never knew how to love. So the answer to your question is within how do you love? I think it's proving to somebody they're seen and seen appreciatively. So I would say to that person, that young person, here's what I just noticed. I just noticed that you were getting along with your brother. You may not be aware of it, but let me tell you what I noticed that leads me to believe that you were aware that they wanted to get to the sink first before so they could wash their hands. You gave space for that. You didn't elbow her. You didn't get annoyed by her wanting to go first. You were very thoughtful in allowing that to happen. That shows me your compassion. Those are beautiful qualities I see in you, and you're continuing to do it. A minute's gone by, and now you're continuing to be nice to her because you're showing, and that's a way you're showing me your loving kindness. I'm not trying to BS anybody. It's imperative that we speak authentically and we base it on fact. And because kids will reject it if it sounds like BS. But I think that's how kids wind up going, wow, somebody sees me. And they begin showing up. I know as a student, I was a smart kid, but I got zeros for all the teachers who just mechanically, did what they were doing without including me or being annoyed by me. And for the 2 or 3 teachers who really saw me, I was the best kid in the class. How do you explain that? I was so super sensitive. It's beautiful. People thought it was a horrible quality back then, but it's my gift is to be that super sensitive. And I think we have, in our crazy world now, we have more and more kids who are super sensitive. And we have to relay. We can't just say, I love you, Billy. We have to say, here's what I'm loving right now. We don't even have to use the word love. We're conveying love. We're transmitting love by saying what we see appreciatively.
I think it's, and again, it's true at all ages. And there's this, I can't tell you how much the conversation that Mom and I have, or Ginger and I have, or Ginger has with Mom, or we have at the table, is about how much we appreciate each other and how much each other has just oriented around appreciating each other and helping each other and loving each other. For Mom, I don't think Ginger's mom has ever been in an environment like with me and Ginge. And it's like she caught on. She's 93. Doctors thought she was heading toward dementia when she came to live with us 2 years ago, and just emphasizing the good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And she has become a master at it. And she was a third grade teacher for more than 20 years. Um, and she's a woman who loved my work from the beginning. So I just adore her. I mean, she just was 100% behind everything. She said, I never had a child that we would call ADHD now. I had their attention. She said, I didn't never had a child who came into my grade below grade level and left below grade level. I gave them attention. And now
Mm-hmm.
she's picked up on this idea almost instantly of paying a lot of attention to what each other do well and how much we take care of each other. And she's just mastered it, and you would not see any cognitive difficulties in her on the face of things now. No symptoms of dementia at all. Um, she communicates with friends on the phone completely positively, which she has always done. Um, and she's just fully recovered from all the trauma. Makes me wonder how many people that we say have it's dementia if you're old.
Yeah.
It's really trauma and and
Yeah.
and uh,
Do
and
you,
hurt.
do you know a man named Peter Whitehouse, Dr. Peter Whitehouse, who writes, John Hopkins writes a lot about dementia. And his wife, Kathy Whitehouse, started the Cleveland Intergenerational School. And it's
Mm.
based on nurtured heart. And they recruit people from senior
Say
care
again. It's based
facilities.
on what?
It's based on my work.
Oh, I'm glad I
It's
asked you
based
because that
on
got lost.
the nurtured heart approach, and he's become, in his own way, a fan. I've talked to him recently of believing that exactly what you're saying, that dementia is a function of things we don't understand. But I'm hearing you loud and clear, hypothesizing that perhaps the beauty of your appreciative lifestyle, it's not even it's in your bloodstream. Your ability to convey and live a life and surround this elderly person with not just saying I love you, but living it and breathing it, saying it out loud in varieties of ways. It's been a wellspring of
It has
health.
been. I'm just thinking about before when we finally got a connection. I'm sure Howie and certainly I was very, very nervous, but I took the extra time before taking an hour aside, and I made sure Mom was got her hot water that she loves, and got her a tangerine, and was set up with the TV. And it's those actions that make her know I'm really thinking about her. And that's just another thing of the actions we can do with each other. Let's talk a minute about that. Um, I mean, the actions we can do with each other when we're in such close quarters are really amazing because we get to see what each other needs. Um, when
Yeah.
Ginger's not feeling well, she just loves being checked on. I do a lot of checking on. She checks on me all the time. You'd think that with us being on top of each other, we'd be sort of looking for spaces to hide in. But actually, we're using
Mm.
it to be sure each other's doing well. If one of us gets sad looking, I mean, Mom cried this morning and we asked her why, and she said it's just this whole thing out there. It's just such a whole thing. I don't know what to do with it. And we talked for a while, and then we began talking again about the blessings of this house, the blessings that we have, and we have much more good fortune than most other people. But we all have good fortune. I mean, that it's not that I have more good fortune because believe me, folks, for a good part of I come from depression so bad, folks. Let me say that. I come from depression so bad that I probably didn't have two happy days until my late 40s when I got together with Ginger. Because so much of what I've learned about love, I learned with Ginger. But when I was young, I was continually suicidal. And so let me address that for a minute. There's just a sort of a separate thought, but a lot of you are going to be feeling depressed now. You're going to be feeling that you'll never earn a living again, that your identity has been destroyed. You may be feeling that you've lost somebody that you can't recover from. You may feel the marriage is falling apart. We know that in other countries, the divorce rates have already gone up from families that have recovered and uh, or have been sequestered, and then things open up a bit for them. Because this can be such a trial, and we know that the divorce rates are up, as I said, but we also know that the reported abuse rates are up, and we also know that the reported domestic violence rates are up. And I come from terrible past experiences. I really want you to know that this is not a man who just had a glorious, happy time. I had to work to figure the stuff out, and then I had to be blessed in finding Ginger. And I came close to killing myself, Howie, a number of times. And sometimes
I
it
had
was,
no idea. Thank you for sharing it.
yeah,
Thank you.
sometimes closer folks than, a split second. So I want to tell people who are suicidal, those split seconds of you hurting yourself, end it. And as a therapist, I can tell you, having treated so many suicidal patients, and thank God I've never had a completed suicide in my practice. I've only had 3 attempts in 50 years that were, so, and I think it's because I let people know you got life ahead of you. You got
Yeah.
life ahead of you. And
Yeah.
because I've been on the same road as Howie, a little differently, but on that same road of bringing out the best in people and loving people, encouraging people. So to those of you who are just feeling really down and out now, I want to let you know that this man, me, who's been there, it is not possible to have been closer to suicide than I was. This man who has been as depressed as people can get, had a wonderful life. And that's true for many people. In fact, I begin to think that the severity of your depression is the signal, the strength of the signal of your potential to love. Because why would you be
Yes.
so
Yes.
depressed? Not true. Why would
Yes.
anybody, why would you
Yes.
want to, why would you be so depressed if you didn't have a stifled life force that was screaming
To love and
to
be
love,
loved. Yes.
be loved,
Yeah.
to
Can
create?
I?
Go ahead.
Yes. Can I jump in? So,
Sure.
when you talked about your life, the suicidality you've lived with, I what came to me was how many ever times I did things that was death-defying, that put my life in danger.
You took
And
risks.
yeah, well, yes, I kind of could have been dead dozens of times over the way I live my life, and so the point I want to get to is recently, a couple of times, and I've done this in the past before, I've actually taken some, especially with this COVID-19 thing and all the death that's going on and all the, how could we help but think, am I immortal? Am I immortal? And where do I fit into this? I've actually allowed myself to breathe a little bit, give myself a few breaths, and imagine being present at a memorial service, at my memorial service. This is a daring, crazy thought. And I allowed myself to hear what people were saying about me, how, when, when you hear a tragedy, is that on planet Earth, there's 7.5 billion people, and there's 150,000 people a day dying around just for natural causes around the world. And probably at every memorial service, there are people lined up at the microphone talking about how great that person was. And in real life, so many people never hear a word about their greatness. And I'm a fan of early onset greatness. I want there to be a diagnostic category someday called EOG, early onset greatness. And I purposely listened to what people were saying. And while I was in kind of imagining myself in spirit form, I was going, yes, I am. I am that greatness. I am that greatness. I am that greatness. And I felt, I then, of course, realized, 20 seconds later, I was alive. And I cherished being alive that much more. I cherished the beauty of, wow, what a gift. I get to live this life. I get to be loving, even though, yeah, and you couldn't be more right that depression is a flag that shows we have that buried treasure in our backyard. And all we got to do is tap in and allow ourselves those moments to enrich ourselves with these messages of love. If I hear somebody imagine somebody saying, "Oh, Howard was he had this quirky, humorous way of pushing people to see the beauty of other people," and I own that quality, then I'm actually being loving to myself. And I believe I could actually then love other people better. It allows me to see those qualities in the other person better. So it's an act of love. And, I'm not recommending what I just said. It's not for the faint of heart, but if in a moment of courage, especially in light of what you said, if you could just breathe through that and entertain what people would say at the microphone for yourself, you go, oh yeah, I am that person. How about that? What would people say about the great Peter Breggin? What a courageous man, how crazy courageous you've been fighting the AMA, the American Medical Association. How brave you had to be to go sit on stage with Oprah Winfrey. God, I can't even imagine that. How brave you had to be a witness defiant to pharmaceutical companies and know that they're playing hardball and they're not going to roll over and make things easy for you. How courageous you are, crazy courageous. And therefore how committed you are to your intelligence and your what you know to be right. Your integrity is stellar. So, that's to me what some people would be saying about you. I hope you can own that about yourself.
Well, I think in the comfort of being 83 years old and having a loving wife and now a loving mother-in-law who's really like my mother. I did not have a loving mother.
Don't give the excuse.
I think I can manage that. So some lessons in here. Some parting thoughts that I wanted to tie in together, and that is particularly.
Am I letting you off the hook there?
No, we're doing fine.
Okay, go ahead.
You're doing
Okay.
fine.
Tie away.
I get a lot of love from the universe now. I mean, I do. I get a lot of love wherever I go now. I don't have to be afraid. I used to have to be afraid when I went places.
Right.
So I'm good about that. What I want to just think about and make sure that I get to communicate and that Howie gets to communicate is to the folks who are not happy the way we are, not full of joy the way we are, or if your loved ones, the people you're in the home with, they're living with, really down, they're drinking, they're smoking too much dope, they're your angry children, all of the behaviors that we call pathologic and they're so annoying, they are all underneath, driven by what Howie is describing as this enormous energy in people. And people are only doing all that negative stuff when they've gotten hopeless. When the only way to get help, as Howie so well describes, is by being the hot brand, the noisy person, the troublemaker, the sad person, even the withdrawn person or the kid in the room by himself. Start thinking differently about everything. See all of this as manifestations people are making who really could use some love, some attention to what's good about them, some
Mhm.
help in acknowledging their greatness, their wonderfulness. And if they're family members, you've got histories to draw on with that. You can sit with them and you can say, folks, there's a new day here. I'm committed to letting go of the anger. I'm committed to letting go of the resentment. I'm committed to really seeing the best in each of us and bringing it out and just practicing it and do some of these things Howie says about just bring all that stuff into yourself and marinate it and work with it and be it. And then know you have the ability to love, the capacity to love. We're just all a source of love. And we can do it.
Mhm.
And if you
Mhm.
suppress the
Mhm.
negativity and you bring out the love, you can't be crazy. You can't be depressed.
Yeah.
You can't be hateful. You turn into somebody who is comfortable with yourself because you know you're a source of love and you're doing your best to bring out the best in the people around you. It isn't that far away from anyone to be able to do that. It really isn't. Howie, some more thoughts.
I think you said it all. My parting thought could be, while you were saying so eloquently what you just said, I breathed in a like one breath of resentment, and because I don't have any right now, but I have mounds of it from the past, and so I just extracted some from the bank of my cells, and I instantly, my heart was like one of those readouts. I read, "Oh, I'm the greatness of forgiveness," and I could go 50 more levels of that greatness, and that is one of those qualities where it is never enough, and you could always build to other levels. So I just took one breath. I found some medicine. I'm the greatness of forgiveness, and I can only imagine I'm going to own that, and I'm going to breathe it back out to my cells. And I'm sure I'm going to go back into my life and be that much more forgiving to myself and others. I don't want to be resentful to myself. I don't want to be resentful to others. Everybody's got their own history, and everybody's got their own fuel system, their built-in fuel system. Once they begin tapping into it, and I think just merely tapping into it is you're going to find that you feel more love in general, and you have more free love available to express to people just by being as blatantly honest to yourself as you're talking about. I I couldn't, you said it so beautifully. I think that's a great capstone to this conversation.
Yeah, as you're sitting there, cramped all up in the room and having all those feelings that everybody's having, think to yourself that this is a time for such change that you can make,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that you can, in a moment, you'll make mistakes and you'll have to come back and try some more. But in a moment, you can decide that none of the words that will come out of your mouth will be angry and resentful. You'll learn to handle that yourself or talk about it on the phone with a friend or get a therapist online or just turn to God. But let go of the negativity and decide that you won't communicate it. You'll feel it. You may feel it for years. Don't communicate it. And instead communicate appreciation for the people that you're with and positive ideas about how you're going to handle the future, and not dwell on the negative. Positive ideas about how you're going to handle the future, positive ideas about that person, and set aside your negativity. If you can maintain that, if you're most folks with the stress you're usually under, if you could change and maintain that for 10 minutes, you would have a whole new experience of life. You'd see a window that you could keep enlarging and enlarging and enlarging
Yeah,
until you
yeah.
would
Go
be.
viral with love. Go.
Oh,
A better way to
God.
go viral.
Yeah, your love will go viral in the room. Oh, my God. I don't know. I don't know if that's a good place to end or not. Thank you, folks, for being with us here. Howie, you're amazing. You're astonishing. You're
You're
wonderful.
amazing.
But you've had a
Thank
real,
you.
you've had a
I'll
good
own that.
influence on me,
Thanks
Howie.
much.
Okay.
Thank,
My wonderful
thank you.
audience, thank you so much for listening. I'm going to keep trying to think of ways to communicate to you how to make the most of these terrible times we're going through, because that's what we do. That's what we human beings have done since time began, since we had to go hunt giant mammoths, and since we had to go and hunt and gather women in dangerous places. We have just made the best of it and the most of it, and nowadays we have these abilities and knowledge to create love, to know that that's what really matters. So God bless you.
God
My
bless
friend
you.
Howie Glasser.
Bye,
Thank
my
you.
friend.
Bye-bye now.
Good to see you.